When Prismatic released, it was clear that Bungie's intention was for us to mix and match as many different elemental supers, abilities, and aspects as possible in order to create a sort of rainbow subclass that draws power from each of the 5 elements at once. Just take a look at any gameplay of a Lyre Caliban Hunter, a Knockout Consecration Spam Titan, or any fast Transcendence Warlock build like my last video that you should totally check out because it's super awesome. Anyway, suffice to say that multi-element Prismatic builds are certainly all the rage, but that doesn't mean you can't just build a Prismatic build around purely just one element. Because when you think about it, a mono-element Prismatic build is just like its regular non-Prismatic counterpart, but just enhanced in every way, which neatly brings us onto the topic of today's video. Today I'm going to show you a Prismatic Warlock build that focuses purely on the Arc element that leverages several unique components exclusive to Prismatic, like Lightning Surge with triple Arcane Needle. Let's not forget that because we're on Prismatic, we also have access to exotic class items. And before you click away, hear me out for a second. Bungie are making the acquisition of specific roles on the exotic class items far more bearable in episode 2 with the class item attunement feature that they are working on. Much like the Onslaught focusing, this feature will simply allow you to select a perk in the column of your choosing, and then any class item drops you get will have a much higher likelihood of containing the perk you focused. And if you assume that, like Onslaught, it's a 60% chance for the perk you want, this would bring your chance of getting your perfect 2 out of 2 god roll from a 1 in 64 to roughly a 1 in 14, which isn't that bad at all. So yes, this build will revolve around the exotic class item, but rest assured that we will be discussing several different roles and even a non-class item option so that everyone has a fair shot at the build. Speaking of, the aim of today's build is to embody the power of the Thunder Gods and become an absolute chain lightning machine that mows down anything in its path, which when we're able to activate our Transcendence form does exactly that and more. As I mentioned at the beginning, we are going to be putting a heavy emphasis on the Arc elemental powers, but to boost them to their highest potential, we will also be dipping our toes into things like Devour, Radiant, and Weaken to make sure our neutral game remains equally as strong. Finally, all of the gameplay you'll be seeing in today's video is from solo Master Lost sectors, Grandmaster Nightfalls, legendary campaign missions, and general play. So if you want to learn these secrets to unlimited power, you'll want to stick around. Real quick before the video continues, I encourage you to join our community Discord server. If you're looking for a place to hang out and chill with some really cool people, as well as suggest and discuss builds or anything Destiny related, come find us at discord.gg/llama-d2 or follow the top link in the description. Alright then, like with most of my builds, we're going to take things one section at a time, the first of which is our subclass configuration. And as you can expect, our super of choice is none other than Stormtrance, since it wouldn't make sense for it to be anything else. Stormtrance is actually a pretty decent super for ad clear even in GM Nightfalls because it has a rather long duration and creates a high damaging jolting landfall on cast. And seriously, if you pop this in the middle of a group of ads, they're just going to be dead instantly. This is purely an ad clear super though, and should be used as such. Don't let me catch you doing this for boss damage, even if it hits for around 800k. Seriously, don't use it for boss damage. For our class ability, we're going with Phoenix Dive because it has the lowest cooldown, which will help later when we discuss ability cycling with things like a Spirit of Inmost Light class item, and it's also just pretty nice for movement. For our melee ability, there is only one choice, and that is Arcane Needle, not Chain Lightning. The reason for that is because it pairs incredibly well with the Lightning Surge aspect. Lightning Surge is the only Arc aspect available, and it converts your melee ability into a ranged blink attack that calls down a storm of jolting lightning strikes as you exit the blink. And because Arcane Needle holds 3 charges by default, this now means you can perform 3 lightning surges back to back to back. And I'm sure you can imagine that while you're Transcendent, you can spam this melee even more. On its own, Lightning Surge does around 44,000 damage, which is about 5.1 times more than a normal punch. Also, because this is a melee ability, it can be buffed by a class item featuring Spirit of Synthoceps, which now raises its total damage from 44,000 to around 109,000, an overall 2.45x increase, which when in this state lets you one-shot a lot of the tougher units like Minotaurs, Knights, and Ogres. Moving on, our grenade of choice is going to be Storm Grenade. Storm Grenades received a 20% damage buff in PvE with the release of the final shape, and when paired with the Facet of Dominance fragment, they will also be able to apply the Jolt debuff. In terms of aspects, we've already touched on Lightning Surge, which leaves us with only 4 choices, and I'm pretty sure you know which one we're going for. And yes, it's Feed the Void. Feed the Void will allow any ability kill, including Lightning Surge, to proc Devour, or more specifically, because we're on a Warlock, it becomes Enhanced Devour, which grants even more grenade energy per kill and fully restores all health and shields. The other options like Helion, Bleakwatcher, and Weaver's Call are all pretty good in their own right, but 24/7 Devour is simply too good to pass up. And because Storm Grenade is in the medium cooldown tier, we're going to be getting it back pretty often. Now let's wrap up this section by talking about our fragment choices. First and foremost, we're taking Facet of Dominance, like we mentioned earlier, to make it so our Storm Grenade jolts targets. But also, when we are Transcendent, it will allow the Freezing Singularity to apply the Weaken debuff as well, further increasing the damage our lightning surges are capable of dealing. Up next we have Facet of Sacrifice. This is going to make it so whenever we have a Void, Solar or Arc buff, our ability Final Blows will generate an extra chunk of Dark Transcendence energy, which is important because the build is completely dominated by light abilities, so we need to find as many convenient sources of dark energy as we can. And because we're going to be amplified all the time with our Arc ability Spammage, this fragment will be active 24/7. Our third fragment is going to be Facet of Protection, a very standard pick for most aggressive prismatic builds that simply grants an additional 15% resist when near 3 or more enemies. For our fourth fragment, we're taking Facet of Balance. This is going to make it so rapidly defeating targets with light damage grants melee energy, which fits perfectly with our setup because of course Lightning Surge is a light ability, so every time we're using it and get a bunch of kills, we will be gaining small chunks of it back. And from experience when testing the build, as long as I got enough kills, I would usually have or be close to a fourth Lightning Surge as soon as I'd use my third because of this fragment. Of course, that isn't the only reason, but we'll talk more about that shortly. Our fifth and final fragment is going to be Facet of Awakening, a rather underutilized and honestly underappreciated fragment. On top of the nice plus 10 resilience boost we gain from it, Facet of Awakening will make it so rapidly defeating targets with light or dark damage spawns an elemental pickup of the matching damage type. And because we're all about Arc with this build, this fragment will spawn several Ionic Traces alongside all the kills we're getting. Ionic Traces are actually a pretty strong elemental pickup because they're the only ones that grant energy to all 3 of your abilities. Fire Sprites only give grenade energy, Void Breach's class ability, Stasis Shard's melee ability, and Tangles just don't give you anything. But Ionic Traces do all 3, and the energy itself is pretty substantial, which just helps to constantly keep feeding our Lightning Surge loop. That about does it for our subclass makeup, so now let's move on to our weapon choices. And naturally, with a lightning focused build, you may have noticed that there was a distinct lack of darkness damage, which is exactly what our first weapon, Lost Signal, is here to remedy. Lost Signal is the brand new Stasis Area Denial Frame grenade launcher released alongside the Episode Echoes loot pool, and it just so happens that Area Denial Frames are excellent for generating fast Transcendence energy for the matching damage type. And because Lost Signal is a stasis weapon, this completely fixes our lacking dark energy collection methods. The role I've gone for is auto-loading holster with One for All, but the role itself doesn't really matter. You're going to be generating plenty of dark energy regardless. On the flip side, getting light energy is never going to be a problem, since from just a single lightning surge we already have about half of our light meter charged, so no need to attribute weapons for this. For the exotic of choice, I've actually gone with Risk Runner for 2 reasons. First, there is anti-barrier SMG this season, which simply means you can reliably bring it into any champion featured content, and second, on the off chance you take arc damage, you get to enjoy the full benefits of Arc Conductor to chain even more lightning. Though to be honest, this slot is kinda personal preference. You could also run Cold Heart or even Delicate Tomb, since they both have pretty strong synergies with Ionic Traces, but like I said, it's just down to personal preference. Heavy slot also doesn't matter, I just use a sword for general play and a hard-hitting heavy for any higher level content like a rocket or machine gun. Stats wise, you'll want to prioritize resilience, then strength, then discipline, and if you're lucky like me, you can get triple 100 in all 3. Wait, that rhymed. While still retaining decent recovery. Okay then, time to address the elephant in the room by talking about our choice of exotic armor in the form of the exotic class items. As I alluded to earlier, having a class item with Spirit of Synthoceps does suit the build quite nicely because of the increased damage your lightning surges are going to be dealing, so I would strongly encourage you to break out a role that contains this perk if you have one. For the other column, you actually have several options. You could go for Spirit of the Necrotic so that your lightning surge kills spread poison, Osmiomancy so that your storm grenade partially recharges itself after dealing damage, Apotheosis for more ability spam after your Stormtrance ends, Assassin to go invisible after getting a melee kill, or finally Spirit of Inmost Light for improved ability cycling. There is plenty of choice here, and it's really down to personal preference, which for me ends up being Spirit of Inmost Light because I very much like the improved ability cycling it offers. But many perks will work, just be sure that you at least have Spirit of Synthoceps first. If your class item RNG is really bad though, or you just don't have many, Claws of Ahamkara or Eye of Another World can act as pretty decent substitutes, though do try and get a class item if you can. With my role of Spirit of Inmost Light and Spirit of Synthoceps, the amount of times you can use Lightning Surge back to back is really quite high, and the improved damage from Spirit of Synthoceps is a really nice touch. Now let's talk about our choice of armor mods that improve the build even further. Starting with the helmet, we're taking double hands-on for the bonus super energy on melee kills, and arc siphon so that our arc weapons create orbs on double kills. For the gloves, we're going to need triple heavy-handed so that each lightning surge kill is guaranteed to spawn an orb of power, and for the chest piece, like usual, we just have general resist mods. Just be sure to align them with activity threats. For the boots, we're going with a single stasis surge to improve the damage of our Lost Signal by 10%, recuperation for a small amount of health on orb pickup, and invigoration for a small amount of melee energy also on orb pickup. Finally, for the class item, we're taking outreach for a small bump in melee energy every time we use our Phoenix Dive, time dilation to extend the length of stasis surge, and special finisher to keep our Lost Signal topped up. No build is complete without a tailored collection of artifact perks, so let's quickly go over those now. Jumping straight into column 4, our first perk is going to be Void Hegemony. This is going to make it so defeating weakened targets grants a small Void Overshield, which synergizes nicely with our Freezing Singularity whenever we're in Transcendence. We're also taking Radiant Orbs to provide 10 seconds of Radiant each time we collect an Orb of Power, but more importantly in column 4, we're going to need Galvanic Armor. Galvanic Armor is simply going to grant us an additional 30% damage resist to all sorcerers while amplified, and because we're going to be amplified literally all the time, this perk will never run out. Finally, in column 5, we're taking the combo of Shield Crush to improve the regen and damage of our grenade and melee abilities while under the effects of certain elemental debuffs, and Transference to improve the damage of said abilities by 10% while transcendent. We're actually not going with Shock and Awe because the explosion is relatively weak and is on a rather annoying 5-second cooldown, which if it wasn't, we would totally be picking it, but sadly this isn't the case. So overall, we now have a very strong build, and I hope you've got the general idea on how it's played, but if not, here's a quick summary. Charge into battle with your lightning surges and spam them as much as you can. At the same time, be sure to shoot several shots of Lost Signal in order for your Dark Meter to charge faster and continue spamming abilities the moment you receive them. Once you have your Transcendence fully charged, continue the loop of spamming abilities as long as you can, and when it's over, you're pretty much guaranteed to have your super recharged, so then proceed to use that and repeat the whole process. As always, there will be a dim link at the top of the description for you to copy the build hassle-free, and be sure to join our Discord server so you can discuss your own build ideas as well as view the rest of the build catalog we have here on the channel. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. I hope you enjoyed the build, and I'll see you in the next one. If you made it this far, thank you so much. Your support means the world. And if you're really into the content I create, consider becoming a member of the channel, which not only lets you support me in the best way possible, it also nets you a whole host of awesome perks along with it. A massive shout out to these members up on screen, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now, dear viewer.